I do believe, though, that of the necessity for unions. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Mr. David Fox.
Okay, I think there's two categories of special interest we need to separate. One are economic special interests, and they have absolutely no role in the decisions we make, and they should not. If we're speaking about community groups of special interest, I think there should be a community inclusion to the degree that is reasonably possible improvement in decision-making processes. There shouldn't be the tyranny of the majority, there shouldn't be the tyranny of the minority. People should listen to each other respectfully, without rancor and without name-calling, and hear the various concerns and see if there is a solution we can work to that satisfies everybody and upsets as few people as possible. We clearly have an educational mission to provide in terms of the quality of education. Quality comes first, and the goals of education come first and should not be compromised. But listening collaboratively to the members of the community is not compromised. That's good leadership.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bill Morback.
The community is our constituents. The students, the parents, the community in general are our constituents. We will listen to them and hear out and make sure that we honor the best that we can any views that they have. Ultimately, though, a lot of decisions of curriculum and quality of education is brought down to us by state mandates, by funding controls. Again, it's listening, it's hearing everybody, and then implementing, with taking that into consideration and implementing the best educational processes. Special interests are special and should be heard, but if it's to benefit anything other than the kids, then decisions have to be made that just specifically benefits the education community.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think unfortunately special interest has come to have a very negative connotation about it, and there are lots of groups that have special interests. PTA has a special interest. It's interested in children and education. I think it's very important that we listen to all special interest groups. We try hard as a board when there is an issue before the board to hold open discussion sessions so that any group who has information or opinions on what we are deciding has a chance to come and speak before the board, and then we can decide as a board how we are going to handle whatever particular problem or discussion is about.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Pat's correct, as are several of the other members on the panel, that special interests have sort of taken on this connotation and stigma as being something that's negative. But the reality is, as Pat said, PTA is a special interest, parents are a special interest. Those of you who are here today are a special interest because you have a concern about where the direction of the school district and the schools are going. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the democratic way. You determine what your issues are and you try to make your voices known. And those voices should be heard. In my career, I've had the good fortune to work cooperatively and collaboratively with a lot of different special interests. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You have to do that. You have to go through the process of making sure that you're not making knee-jerk reactions to things that come down the pipe. You take a thoughtful and a pragmatic approach to decisions.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
It's great being able to leverage off the great answers of those who come before you. I would add to Mr. Fox's comment about those with an economic gain and also those with a hard ideological gain, and I think we need to keep a kind of a wary eye out for those organizations also. But for the most part, I think the word is balance. When we have someone that comes to us with a particular agenda and it feels just a little bit uncomfortable, then you need to seek out opinions from the other side and make sure that there's great representation for the issue that's being discussed. So I think balance is the item we need to keep in mind.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Tony Doles.
Speaking of balance, I think I can see legitimate special interest groups and perhaps illegitimate special interest groups. Among the legitimate interest groups are the parents of children in our schools, that's legitimate, and the taxpayers that are paying for that quality education. Now, in regards to illegitimate special interests, you can consider the federal government, who has no constitutional authority influencing education. exercising the power of the purse and becoming a very powerful special interest. So I will be representing the individual, the parents of children in their schools, and the taxpayers.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to be moving on to the audience-submitted questions now. And we will be starting with Mr. David Fox. Each of you will have 1 minute to respond to this question. Given that you are a single vote on a board of 5, how will you effectively build consensus and create any change by board policy?
Thank you. This is a challenge I've dealt with most of my professional career. When you work in large organizations, as I have, everything is collaborative. The only power you have is the power to convince, persuade, build teams, and consensus. In creating an empowered board, I believe everybody on the board gains from that. And when the board understands what their power can be and what their scope and influence can be, I think that people will embrace it. It's not about me imposing my will or my ideas on other people. It's empowering other people to express whatever views they believe they've been elected to represent. I believe that's empowering for everybody, and I believe that that is something that I've done before and I know how to get done.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
As a counselor, I've always been in positions of reaching consensus. I believe that listening is as important as talking. As a board member, for issues that come up, one of the first things that I would do, I know things come up and then we kind of vote on them at the next meeting or meetings after that. One of the first things I would do is go out and find how it affects and what people feel about it and listen to their feelings about issues. As a consensus maker, again, I would listen to everybody's point of view. I would try to present my point of view in the best way. But again, as a district, we are powerful because we all collaborate and work together. And that's the way the board is most powerful too, by collaboration and reaching consensus.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
As one board member, I only have one vote. And we do work together. I think it's my job as a board member to do all the homework we can, to do the research, have any data that's required to support whatever my opinion on an issue might be. I think one of the fortunate things we have on the board is that we do have information items before we have action items. So when something comes to the board for information, we get to hear what other board members' opinions are, and we get the chance to ask district staff to come back to us with more information that help us make an informed decision. And I think we as a board have a good opportunity on the board to discuss and weigh other people's opinions. I think we've done fairly well at forming consensus. And while people think it's bad that we have a 5-vote vote, I think it just shows that we work well together.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
A single person on the board is not intended to make all the decisions and to run roughshod over anything. That's why there's a board, and that's why there's 5. That's why there are, at times, different voices. They can be healthy, and it can be collaborative, and it lends a good perspective to ending up with the best results and outcomes. The great news is, as a district, we've got a lot of talented people teaching our kids in the schools, running the administration. So when there are issues that come up, for folks on the board and historically, we've been able to get great information and data from the folks that support them as a great resource. And that will continue. And I think the logical approach to take is just like we've done everything in business is you listen to all the sides, the points of view, and you get the best information you have to make the best decisions going forward.
Great. Mr. John Anderson.
In late August, when I sat down with my campaign team, my supporters, we talked about what we wanted the campaign to be. And collaboration and diplomacy were a large part of who we wanted to be and what I wanted the community to see and be. So the question isn't so much, can you be a collaborative person, can you work towards consensus, but how do you get other people to trust you and respect you, and how do you display trust and respect to others? And at this point, I want to thank my team because I believe we have demonstrated that we have a spirit of diplomacy and a spirit of collaboration, and a spirit of respect, even for those with whom we disagree. So I think that the proof is in the pudding.
Okay, Mr. Tony Dolt.
A case in point was the Conti case, where I believe approximately 300 people were denied the right to make a public comment before the board decided. Now, in my own many events changed our lives forever. And I think I have told you that as a child, my family lost the right to freedom of speech, assembly, faith, and control over education of their children. So I am focused on protecting individual freedom and giving every parent a voice. So you would know from my background where I would have stood on allowing those parents to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that I've only voted about 10 times in the last 10 years against the recommendation of the superintendent. The way I deal with controversy is first to anticipate it. When I see a controversial issue developing, the first thing I do is I email the superintendent saying we may have a problem here. One of the issues, for example, would have allowed girls to leave school without parent consent to get confidential medical treatment. That came as an information item to the board. I brought it to Mario Contini's attention that this might cause controversy within our community. He was wise enough to table the motion. We are one of the few school districts in California that still requires parental consent when your child leaves school. Another thing I do is I have an outstanding knowledge of the education code, and I write letters to the editor.
Thank you. Our next question comes from a student, and I moved that one to the front because I think all of you are interested in representing students. And that question is, I am a student at Westlake High School, and I, along with dozens of other students, experience the same problem every day. The district has locked the boys' bathroom every day starting at lunch. While this may seem trivial, it is a major inefficiency that results in the loss of much valuable time in class. The next closest bathroom is very far away. What would you do to resolve this issue if you were elected? We'll begin with Mr. Bill Novak.
Thank you for, first of all, as a student, for being here. Second of all, for presenting the question. What I would do is find, first of all, I understand your frustration. Having been on campus, I know how fast lunch period goes. I would find out the reasons why that is done and whether there is some arrangement that could be made to have those bathrooms open. Students should have bathrooms as close as they need on campus, and arrangements should be made for that. Now, again, by finding out both sides of the issue, why those bathrooms are closed, maybe we could find, again, reaching a consensus, reaching a compromise, try to find how to find the solution for why those bathrooms were closed, and then open them up with that solution and that accommodation.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phillips.
Interestingly enough, this issue has come before the board before. Every time students come to speak to us as a class assignment, they're looking for an issue they can raise, and they raise the locked bathrooms. I thought the last time that we handled this, Westlake had dealt with it and actually reopened some of the bathrooms. The problem is a personnel issue because they don't have enough manpower to cover all those bathrooms. And unfortunately, student behavior in the bathrooms requires supervision. Now that you brought it to our attention again, we'll once again go back to the administration at Westlake and see what they can do about it. Because I think before they reached an agreeable solution. When my kids were in school, it was a problem, and we used actually PTA volunteers to monitor the restrooms so that we could keep more restrooms open.
Okay. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Yeah, what she said. Excuse me, sometimes there's an advantage to having been there, done that thing, and Pat certainly has that, and she brings that to the board, and hopefully we'll continue to bring that to the board going forward. Listen, oftentimes there's issues that come up in situations where you look upon these decisions that are made and you wonder why. And sometimes there's good reasons for those, as you said, the coverage of the restrooms, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes it becomes one of those